It was an ordinary afternoon when the unimaginable happened. My disabled daughter, Emily, and I were enjoying a peaceful walk in the neighborhood park. Emily, who had a gentle spirit and a heart full of kindness, loved the routine. She often asked to walk along the green paths, her wheelchair rolling smoothly on the well-maintained trails. But that day, something fell off. As we turned the corner, we saw Karen, the overly controlling HOA member, standing near the park benches with a look that could send chills down anyone's spine. Karen had always been a problem in the neighborhood, making our lives difficult by enforcing unreasonable rules. But what happened next left me speechless. Karen approached us aggressively, glaring at Emily with an expression of disdain. Before I could react, she lunged at Emily, brandishing a knife. The blade sliced through the air, striking my daughter in broad daylight. I was paralyzed in shock as Emily screamed in pain. Karen didn't stop there. As I rushed to help Emily, Karen quickly turned and fled, leaving me to pick up the pieces of the horror she had just unleashed. The police were called, but even as they arrived, Karen's version of events would leave us all stunned. The police arrived at the scene moments later, and the confusion in the air was palpable. The officers rushed to Emily's side, trying to assess the situation while I stood there, my mind racing. My heart was in my throat, but my concern was for my daughter, who was visibly shaken and in agony. Despite Karen's shocking act of violence, she remained unfazed, explaining her actions coldly. It was self-defense, she claimed, as if trying to justify her ruthless attack. She added that Emily's body language had triggered her, claiming that her movements were threatening. This baffling explanation left me furious. How could she justify stabbing an innocent disabled girl based on nothing more than her interpretation of Emily's body language? The officers seemed confused, but were bound by protocol, so they took statements from both sides. I felt helpless as they allowed Karen's bizarre defense to linger in the air. As the ambulance took Emily away, I was left standing in disbelief, trying to comprehend the absurdity of what had just happened. The idea that someone could attack my daughter and then try to justify it was too much to bear. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let Karen get away with this. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the image of Karen's cold, calculating face. It was as if she was completely detached from any sense of remorse for what she had done. The more I thought about her reasoning for stabbing Emily, the angrier I became. Karen had no history of mental illness or any other condition that could explain her behavior. She wasn't even known to have any particular issues with Emily or our family. The stabbing seemed to come out of nowhere, an act of pure malice. Yet, she was now claiming that Emily's body language was the reason for her violent reaction. I couldn't believe the absurdity of it all. How could anyone justify such an extreme response to something as harmless as a disabled girl's body movements? Karen's behavior wasn't self-defense. It was an unprovoked attack, and she was trying to turn it into a twisted narrative to escape accountability. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't just a random villain in our lives. She had been building resentment and animosity against people she deemed undesirable. And now, she had escalated it to violence. Her cold, calculating response was a clear reflection of the hatred she carried within her. With Emily recovering in the hospital, I knew that the real battle had just begun. The physical wounds on my daughter were hard enough to bear, but the emotional scars that came from such a traumatic event would take much longer to heal. The police investigation was ongoing, but I wasn't confident that they would take the situation as seriously as it warranted. I quickly realized that I would have to fight for justice, and that meant pursuing a legal battle against Karen. I sought out a lawyer who specialized in personal injury and civil rights cases. My lawyer listened attentively as I described the events and Karen's bizarre defense. Our legal strategy was clear. We needed to prove that Karen had acted with malicious intent and that there was no justification for her actions. Her claim about Emily's body language would have to be scrutinized and shown to be utterly baseless. The legal process was exhausting, and at times it felt like the world was against us. But I refused to let Karen's attack go unpunished. Emily deserved justice, and I was going to make sure she got it. As the news of Karen's attack on Emily spread throughout the neighborhood, the response from the community was mixed. Some neighbors expressed shock and outrage at what had happened, while others remained suspiciously silent. It seemed like Karen had some supporters who believed her twisted version of events. But as the investigation continued and more details about Karen's past behavior came to light, it became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. Many neighbors came forward to share stories of Karen's past hostility toward residents she didn't like or disagree with. She had a history of making life difficult for others, but this was by far the most extreme act she had ever committed. Emily and I were overwhelmed by the support of those who spoke out against Karen. The community's outpouring of love helped us stay strong during this incredibly difficult time. But there were still some who sided with Karen, turning a blind eye to the violence she had inflicted. As the legal case moved forward, it became clear that the community's response would play a significant role in the outcome. Karen's supporters would have to face the reality of her actions. As the legal case unfolded, more details of Karen's past began to surface, and they painted a disturbing picture of her character. It turned out that Karen had been involved in several previous incidents of aggressive behavior, though they were always dismissed or downplayed. Neighbors who had been intimidated or harassed by her over the years now came forward with their stories. They revealed how Karen had once tried to get rid of families she didn't approve of, and how she had often used her position as an HOA leader to bully others. It seemed that Karen had built a reputation for being a control freak, but I never imagined that she would resort to violence. Her past behavior now seemed to explain a lot of what had happened to Emily and me. The more I learned about Karen, the more determined I became to bring her to justice. I couldn't let someone like her get away with attacking my daughter, especially when she had been so blatantly malicious in her actions. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Karen had prepared her defense, but I was confident that we had the evidence to prove her guilt. My lawyer and I had spent weeks building a solid case, collecting testimonies from neighbors, and analyzing the physical and emotional damage Emily had suffered. Karen's defense was the same. She claimed that Emily's body language had somehow made her feel threatened. It was absurd, but we were prepared to counter it with every shred of evidence we had. We brought in experts to testify about how body language could not justify an act of violence. As the trial unfolded, Karen's lies were exposed one by one. The truth about her violent tendencies and manipulative behavior came to light, and it was clear to everyone that she was trying to avoid the consequences of her actions. The courtroom was tense, but as the verdict was read, I felt a sense of relief. Karen was found guilty, and justice was finally served. The courtroom buzzed with the finality of the verdict. Karen had been held accountable for her actions, and she would face the consequences. As the judge declared her guilty, I felt a deep sense of relief wash over me. Emily, though still scarred from the attack, was beginning to heal, knowing that Karen would not escape the justice she deserved. The case was a turning point for our community, as it showed that even the most seemingly untouchable figures could be held accountable for their actions. No one, not even an HOA Karen, was above the law. As I sat beside Emily, who was now smiling despite the trauma, I knew that this battle had been worth every moment. Karen had tried to ruin our lives, but in the end, justice had prevailed. Emily was safe, and we were moving forward stronger than ever.